Ever trip over thin air? Like, how do we even walk?
Yeah,
We're diving into the system that makes it happen.
makes walking happen.
The musculoskeletal system.
That's it.
Bones, joints, muscles, the whole shebang.
The whole thing
And what happens when it, well,
goes wrong.
goes wrong? We've got a great overview as our source material today.
It's a good one, packed with info.
So first off, the basics. We know the parts.
Bones, joints, muscles.
Right, but how do they actually work together?
Think of it like a house, all right?
Okay,
Bones are the frame, the strong support.
makes sense. So like the wooden beams and all that?
Exactly. And then the joints, they're like the hinges and connectors. Let the frame move.
So I can open a door or a window swings open?
That's the idea. Joints give you that flexibility.
All right, so we've got the framework, the connections.
Yeah.
What about muscles? Where do they fit in?
They're the workers, the power behind it all.
Okay, the workers.
Muscles attach to the bones with tendons, and when they contract, they pull the bones, creating movement.
Ah, so like I want to lift my arm, the muscle pulls on the bone, and up it goes.
Exactly, like a well-coordinated construction crew, always working.
I like that analogy. So it's a constant construction project inside of us.
You could say that, yeah.
And speaking of construction, let's talk bones. They seem so, I don't know, unchanging.
But there's a lot going on under the surface.
What do you mean?
Bones are constantly being remodeled.
Remodeled, like renovated.
Exactly. Old bone gets removed, new bone gets put in. It's a dynamic process.
Wow, so our bones are like fixer-uppers.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And this remodeling, it's crucial. Keeps your bones strong.
Strong so they can handle what? Stress.
Exactly. The stress you put on them every day, and it helps repair any tiny fractures.
So our bones are constantly repairing themselves. That's
Yeah.
wild. And there are different types of bones, right?
Yep, 4 main types. Long bones, like your femur.
The big one in your leg.
Yep. Short bones, like in your wrists and ankles.
So many little bones in there.
And flat bones, like your skull and ribs.
Protecting all the important stuff.
Exactly. And then there are sesamoid bones. They're embedded within tendons, like your kneecap.
Oh yeah, the kneecap makes sense.
And don't forget about bone marrow.
Right. Blood cell factory, super important.
Couldn't live without it.
Okay, let's move on to joints. I'm especially curious about those freely movable ones, like knees and shoulders.
Yes, those are synovial joints, the ones that let us dance, throw a ball.
The fun stuff.
Exactly. And they are fascinating.
What makes them so special?
Well, they have all these specialized structures that work together to allow for smooth movement. First, there's a capsule that surrounds the joint, like a protective sleeve.
Okay, a capsule.
Then you have ligaments, these strong bands of tissue that connect bones and help stabilize the joint.
So the ligaments keep everything in place.
Precisely. And then you have cartilage, this smooth, slippery tissue that covers the ends of the bones.
I've heard of cartilage. It helps cushion the bones, right?
Right, it prevents them from rubbing directly against each other, reduces wear and tear.
Makes sense. So much going on in there.
And then there's the synovial membrane.
Synovial membrane.
This membrane lines the joint capsule and produces synovial fluid.
And what does that do?
Synovial fluid is like the oil in a machine. It lubricates the joint, reduces friction, and allows for that smooth range of motion.
Wow, it's amazing how our bodies are like well-oiled machines.
They really are.
Okay, so that's joints. Now on to the powerhouses, the muscles.
Yeah. The muscles.
We know they make us move, but I'm curious about the different types.
You bet. There are 3. Skeletal, smooth, and cardiac.
3 different kinds, wow.
Skeletal muscles are the ones we consciously control.
So when I decide to walk, talk, lift my coffee cup,
That's your skeletal muscles at work.
got it. What about smooth muscle?
Smooth muscles are found in the walls of our organs, like the stomach, intestines, blood vessels.
Oh, so they're working behind the scenes.
Exactly. They work involuntarily, helping with digestion, blood flow, all sorts of things.
Keeping us alive and functioning. And what about cardiac muscle?
That's the muscle of your heart.
A heart. So it's a special kind of muscle.
It is, and it's also involuntary.
Thank goodness. Imagine having to think about every heartbeat.
I know, right? It would be exhausting.
So we've got those skeletal muscles,
Yeah.
the ones we can control. But how do they actually work?
Well, they work in pairs, opposing each other.
Opposing each other, huh?
Yep. When one muscle contracts, it shortens and pulls on the bone. At the same time, the opposing muscle relaxes and lengthens.
Ah, so it's like a tug of war.
Precisely. This back and forth action is what creates movement.
I see. That's how I can bend and straighten my arm. One muscle pulls one way, the other pulls back.
Exactly. It's a Pretty elegant system.
It is, but unfortunately, things can go wrong with it.
Sadly, yes. Like any complex system, it's vulnerable to a variety of conditions.
Like what kind of conditions?
Well, bones can fracture, weaken with age, or be affected by diseases like osteoporosis.
Right. Osteoporosis weakens the bones, makes them brittle.
And then joints can become inflamed, like with arthritis.
Arthritis, yeah. A lot of people struggle with that.
It's very common. And then there's wear and tear on the joints over time.
Makes sense. We use our joints constantly.
And muscles can be injured, become weak, or experience pain.
So a lot can go wrong.
Hmm.
How do doctors figure out what's happening?
They use a variety of tools. Imaging techniques are common. X-rays, MRIs, CT scans.
I've had x-rays before. They'd let you see the bones.
Right. MRIs and CT scans give even more detailed pictures, showing the soft tissues too.
So they can see the muscles and ligaments and all that.
Exactly. And blood tests can also be helpful.
Blood tests. How do those relate to bones and muscles?
Well, they can help identify markers of inflammation, which can indicate a problem with the joints or muscles.
I see. And of course, a good old-fashioned physical exam is important.
Absolutely. The doctor will assess your range of motion, strength, reflexes, and overall movement.
So it's like putting together a puzzle using all these different pieces of information.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We explored how the musculoskeletal system works, learned about common issues, and even touched on diagnosis.
It's a fascinating system, really.
It is. What are your final thoughts?
I think the key takeaway is that this system is both incredibly complex and incredibly resilient. But it needs our care.
What do you mean by care?
Regular exercise, a balanced diet, listening to your body's signals, all of that can make a big difference.
So taking care of ourselves is key to keeping this system healthy.
Exactly. It's the best way to prevent problems down the road.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
So next time you're out for a walk or playing a sport or even just standing up, take a moment to appreciate this amazing system.
I agree. It really is a marvel.
And remember, just like a well-maintained machine, a little bit of care and attention goes a long way.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. You know how much I love these.
Yeah, me too. Always interesting to see what we uncover.
Today, we're going to take a look at medical imaging.
Ooh, that's a good one. Always a bit of a mystery, right? How can we see inside the human body?
Right. It's kind of like magic. But obviously, it's science. And our listeners are super interested in learning more about radiology and nuclear medicine,
Makes sense?
especially how these techniques are used to diagnose and even treat diseases.
Yeah, it's incredible how far we've come.
And, we're going to talk about everything, from those classic x-rays we all know to some way more advanced techniques.
It's a fascinating field for sure. A lot of people don't realize just how much goes on behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So shall we start with radiology? I mean, everyone's had an x-ray at some point, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's the OG of medical imaging. But it all starts with those x-rays, invisible beams of energy that can actually pass through our bodies.
It's wild. I remember seeing my first x-ray as a kid. My broken arm, I think. And I was just mesmerized by it. Like, how can we actually see the bones?
Right. Well, it all comes down to how those x-rays interact with different materials. Like, they can penetrate things to different degrees, right?
Right.
Some substances block them more than others.
Yeah, so denser things like bone, they show up bright white on the image.
Exactly. Because they absorb more of the x-rays. But softer tissues, like muscles or organs, let more of the x-rays through, so they appear darker.
And that's what creates the contrast. Pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
But, there's a lot more to x-rays than just that. I read that they can also scatter, which is why technicians wear those lead aprons, right?
Oh, absolutely. Scattering is a big deal. It's basically when the x-rays kind of bounce off in different directions, and that can be dangerous if you're exposed to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the lead apron helps protect them from that stray radiation. It's all about safety, right?
Safety first, always.
And, speaking of safety, one thing I've always wondered is how much radiation we're actually exposed to during an x-ray. Is it a lot?
Well, it's a valid concern, but the amount of radiation used in a typical x-ray is actually very small, and radiologists are really careful about minimizing exposure.
That's good to hear, because I know a lot of people are worried about radiation.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the benefits of x-rays far outweigh the risks in most cases. I mean, think about all the information we get from them. Diagnosing fractures, detecting pneumonia.
So many things. They're really essential.
Totally.
So we've talked about traditional x-rays, but Technology has come a long way, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Digital radiography has pretty much taken over. It's way more efficient.
Yeah, I remember those old X-ray films. Kind of a pain to deal with, right?
Big time. Storage was a nightmare. And if you needed to share those images with another doctor, you had to physically send them. Digital radiography changed the game.
Now it's all digital files.
Yeah.
Easy to store, easy to share.
Exactly. And the images are higher quality, too.
That's a big plus. And then there are the more advanced techniques like CT scans. I find those mind-blowing. You're essentially getting a 3D view inside the body.
I know, right? It's like science fiction come to life. CT scans use X-rays too, but they take multiple images from different angles. And then a computer combines them all to create those detailed 3D pictures.
So it's not just a single flat image like a regular X-ray. You can actually see the organs and tissues from all sides.
Exactly. And that level of detail can be crucial for diagnosis, things like tumors, internal injuries, all that.
Makes sense. And then there are contrast studies. I've heard of those, but I'm not exactly sure how they work.
So sometimes we need a little help to see certain structures more clearly, like maybe we want to visualize blood vessels or the digestive tract.
Right, how do you do that?
We use a contrast agent, basically a special dye that shows up brightly on X-rays or CT scans. We can inject it, swallow it, or even administer it as an enema, depending on what we need to see.
So it kind of highlights the areas you're interested in.
Exactly, and that helps us to diagnose problems that might not be visible otherwise. Blockages, leaks, tumors. It can reveal a lot.
It's like giving the X-rays a little boost, right?
That's a great way to put it.
So we've got X-rays, CT scans, contrast studies. Radiology is a pretty diverse field.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we can't forget about interventional radiology.
That's where imaging meets actual treatment, right?
Exactly. It's minimally invasive procedures using imaging guidance.
So what kind of procedures are we talking about?
Oh, all sorts. Biopsies, where they take a small tissue sample for testing. Angioplasty, where they open up blocked blood vessels. Even things like draining abscesses.
Wow, so they're actually using imaging to guide tiny instruments inside the body.
Exactly. It's pretty amazing. They can target very specific areas with incredible precision, less invasive, quicker recovery times.
That's a huge advantage for patients.
Mhm.
And it all comes down to being able to see what's going on inside.
Imaging is the key.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with radiology, but there's another whole area we need to talk about. Nuclear medicine.
Yeah. It might sound a little intimidating because of the word nuclear, but it's actually a really powerful tool.
It is, and it uses tiny amounts of radioactive materials to diagnose and treat diseases.
Right. It's all about harnessing the power of radioactive decay.
Okay, can you break that down for us? What exactly is radioactive decay?
Sure, some atoms are unstable, and they release energy as they try to become more stable. That energy is what we call radiation.
And we can use that radiation to create images.
Exactly. We attach those unstable atoms, called radionuclides, to specific molecules that target certain parts of the body.
So you're basically introducing a tiny amount of a radioactive tracer into the body.
Right. And then we can track where it goes using special cameras that detect the radiation being emitted.
So it's like a little beacon showing us what's going on inside.
Perfect analogy.
And that's how we get things like PE scans.
Right.
Those are pretty amazing. I've heard they can actually show how organs are functioning.
Absolutely. PET scans are incredible. They show us metabolic activity, basically where cells are using energy. It's like watching the body in action.
So if an organ is working harder than usual, it'll light up on the scan.
Exactly. Or if there's an area of decreased activity, like in a tumor, that'll be evident too. PET scans are really useful for things like cancer diagnosis and staging, monitoring heart disease, even neurological conditions.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff. And what about SPECT scans? How do they differ from PET scans?
SPECT scans are similar in that they also use radioactive tracers, but they focus on different things. Like SPECT scans are great for looking at blood flow or how well certain receptors are working in the brain.
So different tools for different jobs.
Precisely. Each imaging technique has its strengths and weaknesses.
This is all super fascinating, but I'm sure our listeners are wondering how this actually applies to them. Can you give us a real-world example of how these techniques are used?
Sure. Let's say someone has had melanoma, a type of skin cancer. A PET scan can be used to check if the cancer has spread to other parts of the body, what we call metastasis.
And why is that so important?
Well, catching metastasis early is crucial for successful treatment. The earlier we know it's spread, the better the chances of stopping it. And a PET scan can often detect these tiny areas of cancer spread that other imaging methods might miss.
So it's really all about early detection.
Absolutely. Early detection can be life-saving.
Wow. We've talked about how X-rays and radioactive materials can help us see inside the body, but what about the future? What kind of crazy imaging technologies might we have in 10, 20, even 50 years?
Oh, that's the fun part. Who knows? Maybe we'll have microscopic imaging that can show us individual cells in real time. Or maybe we'll be able to image brain activity in ways we can't even imagine now.
It's mind-blowing to think about the possibilities. Imagine being able to see the human body in such incredible detail.
It's exciting. The future of medical imaging is full of potential.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive.
Great discussion.
It really was. And, for our listeners out there, I encourage you to keep exploring the world of medical imaging. There's so much to learn. And who knows, maybe one of you will be the one to invent the next groundbreaking imaging technology.
That'd be something.
Until next time, everyone, thanks for joining us.
See ya.